I'm a big fan of public embarrassment. I realized that I just spent a whole video talking about how I was afraid of like embarrassing situations. I think public embarrassment as a punishment should come back. Like those stockades they used to put drunk dudes in back in the Middle Ages, or at least popular culture has made me believe that they used to put drunk people in stockades in the Middle Ages. Bring those back. You know, some guy's absolutely tearing up the bar the night before, and you're just like, that guy sucks right now. Throw him in the stockade for like a couple of hours. Let me throw an apple at him. Not too hard. You know, I'm not trying to injure the guy, but just like a nice soft toss. Maybe a banana or something. I don't know. I don't know what they had at their disposal to throw at somebody that had been annoying them the night before, but just public embarrassment is a way to me, it would be an incredibly corrective behavior, right? Like I'm so afraid of embarrassing, anxiety-inducing situations that if you were like, well, don't do this because you might be thrown in the stockade or whatever, I wouldn't do it. I would do everything in my power not to do that thing that would make you end up in the stockade, right? Like I would avoid it like the plague. I would be able to avoid it like the plague. I would have the skills necessary to not get thrown into the stockade. And that is something like what am I talking about? We're talking about players getting subbed out before halftime because that freaking happened and it was awesome. And it does not happen enough. And it went. They took it to the logical extreme as well. So this is in a match between Nottingham Forest and Fulham. Final score was 3-1, and it was 2 goals in 20 minutes basically for Nottingham Forest, who, in case you haven't been paying attention to the Premier League recently, are the only reason that the teams in the relegation zone have any hope, because Nottingham Forest has managed to stay close to them. Right? They've got, I think, 25 points, like 8 matches left or 7 matches left or something. And then if you look over here, you will see three substitutions at 33 minutes into the game. This goes so hard. This is awesome. It's not, I mean, honestly, I feel like 2-0's not crazy, right? And he wasn't justified in this because a third goal did happen right before halftime after the triple substitution. But 2-0's not crazy. We've seen situations that got far worse than this, not just in the Premier League, but in other, all over the world, where you see teams go down 3-4-0 pretty early, and you still don't see a substitution made, let alone 3 before halftime. And then there's a debate going around like, well, is there anything more embarrassing in sports? I mean, obviously, I would say the majority of you, at least according to the analytics that YouTube gives me, but we all know that's big state propaganda anyways, are not American, right? And that means that if I start talking about, things in American football or basketball, the odds are you're probably not going to understand what I'm talking about. But when it comes to football, soccer itself, is there something more embarrassing than getting substituted out before halftime? I don't know. I honestly, off the top of my head, I cannot think of something else more embarrassing. Getting Panenka'd as a goalkeeper, that was always my worst nightmare. I'd rather stand in the middle and let you score than get Panenka'd by somebody that's taking a penalty. And then they just kind of stare at you and laugh at you or whatever. Getting chipped from the halfway line as a goalkeeper is another great example of you just have giant egg on your face. You take a touch and you miss it and the ball goes into the back of the net on a back pass. All of those things as a former goalkeeper at an incredibly low level were things that have caused great fear and agony in my life. But those come nowhere close to getting substituted before halftime. As an outfield player, I can't honestly think of literally anything close at all that could cause this type of embarrassment. And if you're thinking, Zealand, why aren't you showing what happened? I'll show you. It's great because there's actually another underlying storyline, which the announcers are going to touch on here. That's fantastic. But here is Lukic realizing that he's being subbed off.
Kenny, Willian, and Adama Traore are the players coming on.
But first of all, I don't know who the first guy is, right? No offense to Kenny. He's a Premier League player, but I don't really know who he is. Adama Traore and Willian being the guys coming off the bench for Fulham is hilarious. Fulham's not necessarily in the relegation battle. They're looking safe, lower mid-table. So this is a team that definitely has some quality. And they're unloading 2 guys that are just well-known Premier League quantities. They're not, so they are bringing in guys that could make a difference. They're also bringing off Iwobi, by the way. He's the next guy.
Iwobi. Another one of the players being withdrawn. And Harry Wilson.
And so that cheer is for the third player that's being taken off the field. Now, this is, I believe, a targeted effort by the Fulham manager to try and embarrass this particular player as much as possible. Because the guy coming off the field is Harry Wilson, a Welsh midfielder. And Harry Wilson used to play for Derby. Now, I am obviously from the US of A, so I didn't know this until it was pointed out by somebody. But apparently Derby and Nottingham Forest, not exactly best friends, not good fans of each other. They probably exchanged some wanker. I don't know what they do. They eat their full English breakfasts on the opposite ends of the table while staring at each other. I don't know how any of this works, but they don't like each other. So he's subbing off a former Derby County player at Nottingham Forest before halftime. So the crowd is obviously absolutely lapping this up.
Is the other, and the reason for the cheers there is, of course, he's a former
See?
Derby player. And they're never popular.
No, as if it wasn't embarrassing enough, really, to go off just after.
See, he's totally right. This color announcer is picking up on what's happening in real time. The manager of Fulham's trying to make a statement. I'm going to stop referring to them as the manager of Fulham because I don't know who the manager of Fulham is. Manager of Fulham, Marco Silva. Okay, so Marco Silva is trying to make a serious statement here. Fulham has apparently been terrible on the road. They've started terrible on the road again, making 3 of your 5 allotted substitutions in the 33rd minute, including substituting out a guy that is loathed by the local fan base. Incredible statement. And you know what? I think that this works because you know why I think it's going to work? Because these players, they took it. These players took it better than I think the vast majority of players that are out there these days would actually take this. I don't blame any player for the way that they kind of react. You never know what's going on behind closed doors. I was talking about Pep Guardiola a few videos ago and how they were basically never behind closed doors. Well, Fulham, you are able to be behind closed doors sometimes, right? Amazon's probably not following you around. Netflix is probably not following you around. So you never quite know what's happened behind closed doors, whether Marco Silva's in the right or the player. But these players do seem to be bought in. None of them, while they are clearly confused and frustrated, like Alex Iwobi's clearly like, oh, dude, really? But they're not taking their anger out on Marco Silva. They're not publicly showing off giant displays of dissatisfaction for the cameras, right? They are taking this one on the chin. And that is, one, rare in the modern game, but 2, I think very important when it comes to this sort of action being effective. You are doing this as a punishment for those players not executing a certain thing that you want them to be doing as a manager, right? Whether it's some part of the game plan, whether it's just not trying hard enough. And if they're able to take that on the chin and then just come back as a better person, now this isn't some sort of self-help book here. Come back as a better player and be better the next time. Like the next road game or just the next match, period. You start all 3 of these guys again and you go, I will literally sub your ass out again if you don't do what I know you can do. They're going to go out and play a lot better. I think this is good management, and this is why I also think that the public shaming kind of works. Because you definitely don't want to be the guy that got subbed off in the first half twice. And you now know that your manager is not making idle threats here. You know that this is something that could actually happen to you, and they could actually, take you out of the game because they don't think that, you're not up to snuff. Which raises a very important question. I don't really know what that means. I've just heard a lot of people say it. I guess that's kind of how language works, which means I'm about to begin some sort of existential crisis about how and what language, how it works and what language is, but that's neither here nor there. Up to snuff. What does that mean? It comes from some play in 1810 as the first recorded use of it. Whatever, I'm falling asleep reading this. It's not that important. They weren't up to snuff. They got called out on it. I think more managers should do this. And I think being able to do this and not having a terrible reaction from your players is a sign that, generally speaking, the locker room atmosphere and the support of the players and the understanding of the players for what you expect of them is actually all in line. This is actually a good sign. Like if you're a fan of Fulham, to be like, yeah, we were having a bad day, but we're not afraid to make changes. We're not afraid to call people out, and we're not afraid to hold people accountable. Hell yeah, throw them in the stockade. Put them out in front of the stadium, put all 3 of them in a stockade for 3 hours, and let some drunk English guy just yell at them. Nothing too heinous, but just, that one guy that stayed at the Weatherspoons a little too long, just let him off the leash. Just a little bit. I haven't been to a Weatherspoons in a while. Well, weird dreams coming tonight.